Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. And our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we're going to talk about recording in Ambisonic. So I've been thinking about Ambisonic and what it actually looks like. And it's important because as we look at what's happening with the Apple Vision Pro, Ambisonic is going to be a really important piece of that puzzle. So stay tuned for more of that. And we're going to keep on talking about it. But today we'll talk about a little bit about what Ambisonic does. We've talked about how to process it in the past. We're going to talk about mics and recording in the future. So stand by for that. Anyway, if you have questions, go ahead and throw those into Makana. If you have sorry, someone threw something up in front of me and I got a little lost. So anyway, don't ever do that again. Let's jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
Absolutely. Andy Korkendorfer starts us off today from Vieira, Florida, and he says, have there been any interesting announcements or product reveals at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I think one of the most interesting, as they're not a little device, but Honda announced their first electric vehicles. And unfortunately, the design leaves me perplexed. Look at it looks like this was designed by somebody like your son who did the Pinewood Derby car. It's kind of a block with a slanted windshield. They had introduced two of them. They haven't done electric cars before. Let me see if I can find the other one. But I imagine this one, there's so much glass in it, and it's got this animated display on the front. So one interesting aspect is you can curse out the drivers. Here's the other one, which looks even more sleek, but also like a Pinewood Derby car. There's a whole lot of glass in them, and with the display on the front, you can curse out other drivers by text on the screen. So I'm waiting for that to happen. These are concept cars, obviously, and with so much glass, I'd like to see how well they do in the NTSB crash tests, because there's going to be a lot of broken glass on the street.
Go, John.
My Pinewood Derby car was way better looking than that one. Watching all the coverage, Samsung transparent LEDs and LG's transparent, which we're going to be talking about here from Paul here in a second. I think the most exciting thing that I'm looking forward to is Thunderbolt 5.
Thunderbolt 5. Did they talk about the specs?
Oh yeah.
What are they?
It's
what are
faster.
The specs? Faster.
More.
It's the best Thunderbolt ever. I'm pretty sure that they we're releasing the best Thunderbolt ever. I still want to get to a point where they go,
we were doing to go back one generation.
We're gonna because inflation.
Thunderbolt 2.
Yeah, exactly. The new Thunderbolt 2. Go ahead, Bill.
Double the speed of 4.
I think the big display screen in the grill is brilliant, because think about it. If you're angry about what the driver in front of you did, you can not only display your anger there, but you can mirror it so they see it in their rearview mirror correctly. That is a huge leap forward in technology.
Next question.
Next question comes from Paul Wallace, Hot Springs, Arkansas. What's the use case for the transparent TV they're showing at CES? I saw it on Geekazine. LG reveals wireless OLED TV that blends into your home, and that's a site from Wired.
Go ahead, Mark.
So this is interesting because the problem now we have as architects in designing people's spaces is, where is the TV going to go and how are you going to hide all those cables? And usually it means you put a mount inside the VESA mount, you figure out where that's going to be, and you put your outlet and you bring your data in. If this is transparent, you're still going to see at least the power. They're talking about bringing the data wirelessly. The pictures they show are it sitting in bookcases in the middle of a living room. So it's going to be interesting to see how it gets utilized in these spaces.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think they're searching desperately for some kind of use for something like this. I think because they've seen it in every science fiction movie in the last 10 years where somebody's working at the screen and it's transparent, they're moving stuff around, and they invented that in movies so that you could see the actor's face and the stuff he was working on the screen at the same time. It was a gimmick just for moving the plot along. But in reality, it doesn't make much sense to be seeing something through the screen because it makes it harder to see. It's going to be lower contrast because depending upon the brightness of what's on the other side of the screen, it's going to be easier or harder to read. The only advantage would have, you could see it from both sides. Okay, that's why as Mark said, it would be a room divider. But utility, no. Conversation piece, yes. Utility, no.
Go, John.
Don't think TV. This thing is going to be architectural integration as a room divider in conference rooms, on the top of the cafe and the casinos. You're going to see this all over the place in the casinos. I think it's got huge merit.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, and I think also in the home, just simply a way to make this more of a piece of art when you're not watching TV. It doesn't have to be always mounted against a wall. There's plenty of layouts in a home, open kitchens where there's a island or a counter. I mean, there's so many uses where this could be such a beautiful piece of artwork. And I don't mean a big poster or something, but more like a crystal etching. I think you're going to see a lot of it. I'm shocked by how many people still don't like the concept of having a TV in their home. So if this can be a beautiful piece of art that you can occasionally watch something on it, I think lots of people will want and like this.
Yeah, Bill?
I'm confused by the geometry of it in this way. As somebody who shoots a lot, I'm always concerned about crossing the line and getting things confusing for the audience. In this case, if you're displaying text on something that can be seen from both sides, that mirror joke I made earlier, I mean, it's a legitimate thing. Does one half of your audience in a 360-degree space see the entire text display reversed? And does that mean art directors have to use less text and find ways to – that would be weird.
I don't think any art directors are going to care what your monitor is. They're just going to make their video and then you'll just watch it the way you watch it.
Well, but for those of us who are trying to communicate, if half the audience, if you hang one of these on stage, half the audience is going to see it backwards if it's got words.
Going to put it on stage. Like I think that as little, like what they showed there was a pretty good example of like little like fun little things and little bits and pieces, and you could dual it where you have things that are, you see the back of some things and the front of other things. There's a lot of different ways you could push that in, but I think it's mostly going to be design work. And go ahead, Chris.
I've actually done videos where the screen was both sides and transparent, and we actually designed graphic elements that rotated, so they were
there you go.
They were purposely backwards half the time. I liked Mark's comment about like hiding all the mechanics and the connections behind the TV. That's an interesting problem. I think by next CES, I'm going to be releasing a whole line of transparent closet doors, transparent bathroom doors, and for those of you with a junk drawer in your kitchen, a transparent drawer front. That's my idea.
I was at some company. I don't remember what company it was, but they had a little video wall for the conference rooms, and it would list, what's coming up next and who's going to be in there and everything else. It was quite nice. I was like, as a use case, that one was years ago, and I think it was like $50,000. Like it was like I was like, how much does that cost? They're like, way too much, way too much. Someone got excited about it and put it in. Big company, but. I think John's right in the sense that there's architectural reasons to throw these into lots of things, and you'll see them all over the place. They won't be for people's homes. I don't think these are really home things. They're really for companies and organizations and so on and so forth to put up little signs that can pop up and you can still see through them, and people will be like, you'll have a crowd wrapped around them for the first couple of years of, ooh, look at that. That's pretty much what they're going to be good for. Next question.
Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada. In the last macOS versions, network locations, and he notes not location services, has become more hidden. How many people use this feature, and is this a sign that Apple is looking to kill it? I use it all the time as I navigate different networks around work.
Go, Jeff.
I also use it all the time, especially if I'm switching machine from normal office use to like Dante and I want to kill Wi-Fi and switch to the Dante interface. So I think they're probably not looking to kill it. I think I've seen this in a lot besides Apple, other places where people are taking advanced features and they're putting them hidden away in an advanced tab to simplify the interface for common users. we're not common users if we're changing our networks all the time.
Next question.
Ben Varnow in Rosemont, Illinois. I use Zoom options, join without a host, and automatically record meeting to have surgeon faculty record lectures asynchronously. I still have issues with them remembering to share their screen. Does anyone have better solutions or platforms?
Go ahead, Bill.
So obviously the goal would be to be able to reach out easily and fix it for them if you can. I mean, these are busy people. If they're surgeons, their time is very valuable. The only other thing I can think of is dropping back to that old thing I talked about a few times about checklists being critically important, to invent some splash screen that has the simplest, easiest warning, maybe a reminder to the user to do these things, and then click through that start screen to get in there, at least a reminder for them at the beginning of their use initiation cycle. That's all I can come up with.
Yeah, Andy suggested taking a look at Panopto or Epiphan. Both have integrations that might be useful in that area. Another option would be an ATEM, so they have a little button there. They can just push the button. So if you don't see the screen, no one else does either. I think the problem with sometimes screen share is that you don't think of it as something that's right in front of you. But I find that, my recommendation would be to is to teach people how to use some things like an ATEM to do that, push the big button. Now, the other thing to remember is that ATEMs can be controlled. You can call out to them. So what we have done in the past for other ATEMs is we literally machined a button that said, this is the screen. Like it was a little icon for the screen, and this is a person, and this is both people, and this is this is this other camera. And you just push the big button, and it's an Arduino hidden inside of that. And then that talks to so that way they don't see the ATEM. They just see this nice little box that sits there that they just push the button, and it worked exceptionally well. And so it looks nice. It sounds, they don't think about it and they click on it. But then you have if you don't see the screen, no one else does. And I think that might help them remember that it's there. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree with you, Alex. ATEM Mini ISO, and then it would also do the recording for them as well. You wouldn't even need Zoom, or you'd need to go online even to record your lectures.
Yeah.
As long as you had a monitor in front of you, you could see what the output of the ATEM is. Just have it do a box of the guy in the corner, and that's it. Hit one button.
I think their goal is to record. The Zoom has this record option, so that I think that they might want to be doing these quick doing the quick record so they don't have to think about it. But I think that having an ATEM in the background doing that would still make a lot of sense.
Does that record in the cloud, or does it record locally when you're doing it?
You can choose. You can choose to whether it records locally or in the cloud. The cloud version, my experience in the cloud version is that it's very highly compressed. So I guess what I would say. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. What would you suggest as a portable audio interface for low latency monitoring with a MacBook Pro that could fit on an airline tray table? Could the Universal Audio Volt 176 work? And he's got a link to it.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was originally, when I read through this question, I was a little confused because low latency monitoring is taking inputs and feeding them into your headphones without going through the entire USB and buffer path of the computer. And I'm like, what are you recording when you're sitting in an airline seat? Are you trying to record some vocals or voiceover? But then I realized, of course, he's going to use this interface other places. So this is a small interface, and that would work doing low latency monitoring elsewhere. And so small enough maybe to fit on that. Probably if I were on a plane, I would just be using the headphone output of my MacBook Pro. One thing to think about this interface, if you're using it, it's USB-C, so that does power the interface unless you're using it with a phone or an iPad that is Lightning, and then you need to use the power adapter with it, which you may have that in your airline seat, you may not have power.
Go, Jeff.
And I thought the same thing, and then likewise also am assuming that was just a size reference, hopefully not during these recordings. And I'll just recommend again the Audient Evo 8 and 4 series. Lots of great features, some physical buttons, really small footprint, also powered over USB-C or a adapter to USB-A. there's two models, but one of the things particularly along the same lines of automation is this is fully USB compliant. So any adjustments either with the volume on the Mac or even through automation and scripting truly controls both inputs and outputs. It truly can control the gain of your mic as well as your headphone low latency output. And then there's really two models, the 8 and 4. 4 is even smaller if you need that. You get some additional features in the mixer control that you don't with the 4. So I'd get the 8 if it'll fit into your kit.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I don't know what airline seats you guys are sitting in because that's a lot of stuff to put on a tray. I don't know what Douglas is trying to do here. It's interesting, but immediately I went to this question. Do you think we're ever going to see a Bluetooth connection where something like, AirBuds or AirPods, whatever they're called, will actually have a good quality? I mean, not like, this kind of quality, but a good quality mic and listening simultaneously, full duplex. It seems like I can listen to my phone quite well, but the minute I try to talk over it too, it cuts the data in half, and now everything is mediocre.
Go ahead, Courtney.
When's that going to happen?
Well, it already is happening because most USB-designed microphones that have USB interface in them have a headphone jack on them, where you can listen to low latency from the microphone itself, which is direct through a preamp, and you also get mixed in the audio return over the USB from your computer. So that's the lowest profile if you have a microphone. If you're going to be using a microphone, otherwise just use the headphone jack or Bluetooth earbuds, but maybe not high quality listening. But doesn't that MacBook Pro have a headphone jack in it still? I thought they still kept that, didn't they?
Yeah, I think the idea is to use it more often. Other things, yeah. The Bluetooth, the problem, there are higher quality versions of Bluetooth. We just don't use them in our phones. They have other ones that have longer range and better quality, but we're not using those typically in a phone environment because they take a little bit more to pair. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Up next, while watching White Christmas, my daughter commented on how well the dialogue matches the songs in quality and tone, while modern musicals do a poor job with these transitions. Why might this be?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it might be because in a modern musical you saw somebody else maybe doing the singing for that actor, which they do all the time in movies. The other thing is in White Christmas, they used to work. They sometimes would record the vocals and the dialogue live, especially if they had to go into and out of a song. They'd have an overhead boom microphone, and there would be a person on stage with a piano playing the song to lead them into the song, and it would lead them in. Instead of doing playback of a pre-recorded song, it would match, the dialogue would match, and later they would go back and record the orchestra to that dialogue recording, or to the original recording that was recorded on the set. And the other thing that they did was just replace all the dialogue in the scene in ADR so that all the dialogue would match. They'd all be using a nice Neumann U85 to record in the recording studio for the vocal numbers. And then they'd go back and record all the dialogue that goes around that scene, re-record all the dialogue that goes around that scene in ADR, or looping as they used to call it. And that's why it matches. There have been a number of movies lately that have tried to record musicals like Les Mis and Cats, I think, was all recorded locally on stage with wireless mics and in-ear earpieces for them to hear the tracks or click track. And they recorded all the music, while doing the production. But there's a lot of problems in doing that. You have to deal with all the footsteps. You have to use wireless mics because you can't get a microphone in close enough, and you have to deal with, there's a lot of noise in the set, fans and from high intensity lights. There's dolly track movement, there's footsteps. So they try it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Go ahead, Bill.
So I also think that there's been a shift towards more gritty realism, and it really struck me when I was in Los Angeles recently at the Motion Picture Museum. They had a big exhibit about The Godfather and how it was done, and I was just fascinated. I was thinking back, that is that to me is kind of a watershed movie in that, particularly in things like Marlon Brando's performance, they were not trying to articulate like a stage actor was. It was very internal and mumbly, and he notoriously put tissues in his cheeks to kind of fill out the character. And I just think things got to the point where you didn't have to be so precise and overt in performance, and that has kind of dialed us back from that kind of traditional, really structured performance that we used to see in those movies in the era of White Christmas.
Next question.
Next question comes from Guy Cochran in Seattle. Greetings from CES. If I could bring one booth live to after hours, which would you be interested in?
What you think is cool. Like when you see something there, standing on the outside of it, there's not a lot of things that I'm looking at going, oh, I have to actually, look at that. I think that I believe that Celestron just released a new telescope, and because we're talking about the eclipse, and a lot of us are thinking about it, so there's a new telescope. I'm on a lot of press things, so I get these announcements. But Celestron's really excited about the fact that they released a new one with a camera and a recorder and all kinds of other stuff in it. I don't know how much it costs, but they're there somewhere because they sent me a press release telling me that they were there. I'll have to look at what booth number. I'm curious what the telescope looks like because we need to get a couple of them for the coverage. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Well, because Consumer Electronics Show is way more than just AV type equipment. They literally do kitchen appliances. They do all sorts of things at the CES. It's an amazing show. One of the things I'm amused by, I don't think I'd send our friend Guy over there to look at it, but I'm interested in kitchen appliances and how they're all hybridizing. You used to go out and you buy a toaster oven and that's all you got. Now it's a toaster oven, it's an air fryer, it's a microwave, an inverter microwave, and it's got like 14 other functions in one weird little device that tilts up or something. It does something odd. I'm just fascinated by how consumer kitchen appliances are morphing themselves into one, the holodeck thing.
Next question.
Khalid Al-Majaya in Hassa, Saudi Arabia. Good morning. Office hours. Have you heard of PixelSnap 2? It's a tool for measuring anything on your screen, including apps. And he's got a link to it. Hopefully someone will find this useful.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I wrote my own utility like this because I did a lot of, screen manipulation and animation for television movies for years ago. And I always had to know, because you're dealing with bitmaps all the times, and it depends on the scale at which you're working. You had to know the exact scale of something and the number of pixels. And this app looks like this. It just moves a little crosshair around and tells you the width in pixels and height in pixels of the area that you define with the crosshair. So it comes in very handy for programmers who want to design windows and graphics that go into those windows that fit perfectly and are not scaled. So it's handy for having. So it's great that somebody made a commercial version of it. I use my own, but it does exactly the same thing. Pretty simple, but there wasn't anything out there that did that easily, I think, in the past.
It looks like it's much improved over the last time I used it. So it has a little crosshair, but it also is visually, it's looking at the imagery and saying this is how much distance is between these two things. This is the number of pixels between these two things. So where this becomes useful is when you are trying to figure out if you're the same distance from the sides of a document or something you're building, or these two things are spaced. In the past, I have been known to use just boxes, like a box here, and I move the box over here, and I move the box back and forth. What this appears to do, when I looked at their video, is you just kind of roll between those things. It goes, oh, there's 32 pixels from here, and then I can roll over to the other side and it goes 32. That would save me some time because I do a lot of. It's worth playing around with. I'm going to download the demo. It's worth playing around with because if it actually does that, $39, I'm gonna buy that in a second because it is that would save me so much time. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, and I will say, to Courtney's point, we've all done of course we can select things. What this does is the snap, thus the snap in the name, the fact that we don't have to sit there because we've all done it and make sure that our when we start our measuring point, it's at exactly the spot we want and end it. That's time consuming multiplied by however many times you do that. And we've all done Alex's trick where you try and save some time, but you create the 30 pixel box. So the fact that it snaps automatically to the 2 points that it can tell you want to measure would be a huge time saver. I will give the alternate argument, which is just in general in terms of computer health. And that is this, I assume, I haven't seen, is something that must always be running. And I will say, unless it's something you're going to use a lot, just in general, be careful about how many things you install that are always running. Inevitably, you will get to the point where something bangs into something else and you don't know why your computer is not stable anymore. So install any of those things with caution, but this looks great.
Next question.
Tlalak Lopez Waterman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania today. I am having a problem with YouTube and OBS. If I stream to a scheduled stream, take it live, and then at the end of that stream, end the stream, then a new stream is started on its own. OBS does not have go live privileges. How is this happening?
Number one is I don't know. I guess the other thing that I would say though is that I would close off OBS from streaming. I don't know why that would happen, because it should be, if OBS doesn't have, now the problem is that OBS may have some API that's going back to it. The other thing is, how did you create that scheduled stream? Did you copy the settings from another stream that might not have been scheduled? So it may be, there is, I believe, somewhere hidden is start stream start stream when encoding. So this doesn't have to be just a start live. I believe in the scheduled streams you can start. There's a button in there, a radio box hidden in there that will say, I want to start the stream when you start getting bits from me. And the reason people do this is so that if you're a broadcaster or you're someone else, no one has to go into YouTube. You set up the account, you get it ready to go, and you hit it, and it just starts the event. But what it may be doing is, I'll take a look at it, because it shouldn't do it it shouldn't create a new event to do that. It should just start that one and end it. But you have to remember that your key is persistent. So if you are continuing to send data to that key, it may be saying, oh, you really wanted to start a new event. So that might be the thing that you want to do. And what I would obviously do is, I guess it would be hard, because you might end up with like a weird little tail. Like if you turned off the live event. I've never seen it do that, but I'm pretty careful about turning all that kind of stuff off. I don't want anything to do anything to YouTube. I want to do it all manually. Now go ahead, Bill.
Dan Tlalak posted in chat somewhere else a follow-up for my question about OBS and YouTube. I may have figured out the issue. I had auto stop disabled, so that means that if I ended the stream and there was still data being streamed, it restarted the stream. It does still reset the stream to public, which is deadly. So I wonder if he's getting a big bill for that turning back on. And
no, I don't think it's a bill. I think it's just that it's coming. You're just putting the event back online. You're going public with the stream. So I don't know, but I don't think I've streamed to YouTube from OBS for a decade. So I'm not 100% sure. Next question.
Sean Leone in Seattle, Washington. In regards to Alex's MidJourney 6.0 conversation, I was curious about his workflow around saving images and what he's doing to be able to find them at some time in the future. Are they saved in photos with tags or something else?
I have some folders that I save them into. Usually they're part of a project, so I'm saving them into the project that's there. The thing to note is that what you do is to get the highest resolution out, you open them in Discord, and then you say open in browser, and then in the browser you drag them onto the desktop or into the folder that you want. So you can save them all there. The other way that you can go is, as long as you make a full res version of it, you can go into your MidJourney account inside of midjourney.com. You see literally every image that you've ever created in there. It's just a long list of every thousands of images and the prompt that got you there. And what's really interesting about that is I use that to go back in time to say, what does 6 do compared to what 3 did or 4 did? I can scroll all the way, but I see every single image that I've ever made is in that document. And so with the prompts. So it's a really it's a very valuable resource. They only did that a couple months ago, and it's really awesome. So I would recommend doing that. But otherwise, I save stuff. The string is the same all the time. So if I do Alex Lindsay _ for instance, because my name, it'll show me everything in my computer that has that. But usually those are saved into groups of things. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana, was watching a YouTube video about in-ear mixing, and he noticed that the bass had 4:1 compression. Where else might one use 4:1 or higher compression ratios, and what effect on tone or transients might there be with higher compression?
Go, Jeff.
So when looking at compression, you can't merely look at the ratio because that is a fairly high ratio. But if the threshold is also high, then only the very highest peaks will hit that. And also, if the attack time is long, a transient may still come through the compressor untouched because the time of the attack is long, so the compressor doesn't have time to reduce the level of that transient. I imagine for bass, however, especially bass into your in-ear monitor, that is going to be to clamp down on transients. So bass is typically played plucking with the fingers. You could play it with a pick, but there is also popping and slapping, which is the thumb is used to slap the string against the neck, and the finger goes under the string and snaps it up and pops it, and that makes a huge transient. Which, especially if you were monitoring that bass in your ears, you would not want that to come through without being compressed. So that's probably why you're seeing that on that in-ear.
Next question.
Darren McMahon in Leeds in the UK. I've been asked if I could rent out 2 Unity Connect licenses. Does anyone do this? I'm interested in the process and, of course, not losing them.
Go ahead, Chris.
Trying to understand what you're saying here, Darren. If you're talking about you've bought a Unity license and somebody wants to use it, I wouldn't give out your password and stuff like that. That just doesn't seem safe. Also, there might be some legal issues in their licensing agreement with you. However, there's a lot of people that have medium or large Unity instances and will set up a subset of people to do a show. I rent out
Unity Connect.
I can hear you there, John.
Am I talking about the wrong Unity?
Unity Connect.
Is that not the
Unity
intercom?
Connect? Unity Connect is passing signals between 2 locations. So it's not Unity Comms, it's Unity Connect. So what he's talking about is he's got 2 licenses of the Unity Connect licenses. And so these are...
I don't know what I'm talking about.
And you need 2 licenses typically because you have a license on each end. This is where you can send, I think, up to 64 channels of audio from one location to another. So you can, I believe it's 64 channels. So this is for... a backhaul between locations. And so now one place that we might use this is in relationship to comms is if we have our comms set up and we want to share some of those comms with, let's say, headsets or other things on site somewhere else, we use this Unity Connect. They have a Unity Connect. We have put a Unity Connect there and it'll output a couple of channels which we then embed and back into something else. But if you but generally it's used to send music or other things, or events. From one location to another, and you can increase the. I don't know. I see the comms rented out a lot. I don't see the Connect rented out very often, so I'm not sure. I've never seen Connect rented out. We own a couple copies, so we use them. So I don't have a lot of data about that. I wouldn't give someone else your licenses if you don't know how to do that to make that work. I wouldn't hand off the licenses to somebody else. I think that they're probably stationary static. They're static. They are. My guess is they're static serial numbers, and if you give them off to somebody else, they can use them anytime they want. Next question.
Liberty White in Atlanta, Georgia, is interested in OpenAI's GPT store. And I had to remind myself that's generative pre-trained transformers. I just wanted to get it stuck in my head. Their store is set to open soon, possibly this week. What are your favorite GPTs, and what do you think will make a good GPT?
Go, John.
I'm super bearish on the GPTs. I think they've got limited life. And I'm taking a wait and see attitude on GPT store and see how it works out.
Go, Jeff.
I think it's definitely going to be the case that folks are going to try things and see what sticks. One of the fascinating things, which I really want to dig into, but the fact that IFTTT has a GPT, it was a plugin, now it's going into the store. But what it does is it lets ChatGPT connect to all the other apps that IFTTT can. So they just give you a few examples here that you can ask GPT to do something, create something, build something, and then get it to other stuff. And I think this will be interesting. But to John's point, I mean, this is a throw it against the wall and see what sticks. And we'll see if this really has any merit or if it's just a shiny thing.
Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York says, yesterday we got to learn about MidJourney. How does this compare with OpenAI's DALL-E versions 1, 2, and 3?
Go ahead, John.
So MidJourney is still the king. They've integrated now DALL-E 3 into GPT-4, which is convenient, I guess. You don't have to run to two different applications. But if you do a side-by-side comparison of the same prompt, you'll see that MidJourney is light years ahead in imagery.
Yeah, I find that having DALL-E build a prompt for MidJourney works really well. So it's like MidJourney, you have to come up with a prompt. You can get very detailed prompts from DALL-E, not from DALL-E, but from ChatGPT. And those work well. In fact, I do stuff where I'll set up a prompt and have it do it in DALL-E, and then I'll take that prompt and put it into MidJourney. And the MidJourney version generally is way better. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree. MidJourney does look better. I've been using, because they just added Copilot to all the Edge browser, which you can now get on the Mac, I believe, as well, and all Windows 11 machines. It does, here's an example. I just created a picture. It's multi-mode, Copilot is, so you can set the whether you want it balanced, creative, or precise. I told it I wanted a cowboy on horseback and Remington-style painting with herding hippos, so it did that. It's limited. It can't. This is a version of DALL-E. It uses DALL-E 3. It gives you 1024 by 1024 aspect ratio only, and so it's not as high a resolution. You can't quite get as high a resolution. You can't control the aspect ratio easy. That's the built-in version to Copilot. But maybe you could if you have an app that uses DALL-E 3 directly. If GPT-4 does.
One of the things we were talking about on Mac Break yesterday was that why is Apple not doing more PR for their Vision the Vision Pro? And one of the things I think that might be the case is you don't want to create too much excitement. You want to create enough excitement to sell all the headsets. When DALL-E came out, our excitement was so intense that people really, really wanted. People were like, "Do you know somebody who can do a DALL-E render?" And you can only do a couple. And they held it so tightly that they created an enormous amount of pressure, and that pressure really created a huge opportunity for MidJourney, because people like me went to MidJourney because that was the place that I could go to do this. And MidJourney built this massive group of people, and then off we went. And I think that MidJourney, because it had all that high sample rate, I don't know how many users they have, 20 or 30 million now. They just are evolving much faster. So it's really interesting. Next question.
Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado. His subject is 3D billboards and the false perspective this technology could be used on any foldable phone or tablet. 3D content viewing without VR headsets is what he's imagining, and wants our thoughts.
I mean, there's been 3D billboards in the past, or 3D images using rectilinear, or these kind of these types of surfaces that let you do 3D viewing, and it's not any angle, but it's more than one angle. But I don't. They're expensive and fragile. Like generally, that's the problem. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the problem with doing real stereo 3D billboards is they only have a fairly simple sweet spot, or they have to track your head. And tracking your head for a billboard is not going to be very good, because there could be 1,000 people watching it at the same time. Also, billboards in LA, they came up with these great LED wall sign billboards, and they put them all over, and then the city outlawed them. And so we can't have LED billboards anymore in Los Angeles because they're so distracting that drivers were looking up to watch the billboard change, and they would run into other cars. So safety is an issue when you're putting something out in public, especially a billboard, which is meant to be looked at while driving or walking.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, I had the same thing. In Tempe, particularly before I moved out to California, they were doing large panel trucks with 3 sides or 4 sides of LEDs on them as mobile billboards and just driving them around through traffic. I was always astonished because every time one came by me, it was really distracting me, this very highly processed, computerized, attract your attention imagery, and you'd get stuck trying to read what it says, and you take your mind off driving for a minute. So I'm a little questionable about this.
Go ahead, Chris.
People aren't paying attention when they're driving anyway. Now, Courtney, I think the problem in LA is it's all the models and actresses looking to see themselves on the billboards.
There you go. Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see. I mean, I think that I was really listening to an article, and they were talking about the fact that the next generation just doesn't want to drive. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, it's really hard. There's this huge drop off by like 40% of interest in driving among the next generation. And the number one reason is that they can't be on their phone. So they can't, like they're every time. So it's really interesting to think about is they really view driving as like holding their breath from all their friends and all the social networks and everything else. And they don't want to drive very far. They don't want to drive they don't want to drive. And so by getting a license, this is in the article. They said by getting a license, they get to be the one of their friends who has to drive, and then they don't get, and their friends are all sitting in the car texting away. And so there's this chain reaction in the sense that they are now don't want the license because the license means you're it, and as the kid who had to be the designated driver in high school, I get it. so anyway, I get the like frustration of that is that so anyway, it's a really interesting thing. But I think that our connection to driving, we keep on thinking that driving is going to stay the same way it is. I don't know. You look at the next generation and there's just not that much interest in driving. It's a really interesting drop off. Yeah, go Jeff.
When I was teaching my daughter to drive, which I guess was about 6 years ago, I said to her at one point, because I was thinking about self-driving cars, and I said, I don't think you will teach your children to drive.
Yeah, no.
I think by the time they grow up, that'll all change.
And it's funny because, for me, I learned to drive when I was 5 or 6 years old, driving tractors, and I was on the highway a couple times. Probably shouldn't have, but I was on the highway when I was 15 a couple times because things needed someone needed to be spelled, on a long drive. So it's funny that you go from there where we didn't think about it. I mean, for me, it was very natural. Just the license just meant I could go further to where my kids are not that interested. Yeah, go to Courtney.
Yeah, when they invent the 3D billboard, the first person to take advantage of it will be Angeline because, her 3D billboards were notorious in Los Angeles.
Oh, my gosh. Anyway, it's funny. I'm not conscious to it. Billboards are illegal in Marin. So in the county that I live in, you can't put a billboard up on the highway. And so you see it immediately. It's funny. You see billboards immediately. As soon as you go into Sonoma County, you see billboards. And as soon as you go into San Francisco, you see billboards. But in Marin, there's no billboards at all because it's illegal. So we don't see any billboards. Next question.
Joaquin Mattis in the Imperial Valley, California. ARRI has released the Trinity Live, a broadcast-focused update to the Gen 1 Trinity. Any thoughts? And he's got a link there to stabilizer systems at trinity.live.
My brother owns the Trinity Gen 1 rig, and so I'll see if we can get him on. We were talking about, I was just texting with him about coming on the show. So if anyone goes back and looks, my brother, I think, showed his Trinity rig at my, downstairs, and it was a pretty good session. So you should go back and look at it. But I think that we'll see if we can get him on, and we'll try to bring that up again. If you see him on, but we'll have him come on again. I think I'd love to have him just come on and talk about film production, like beyond having to setting that setup for that little session. My brother had to get up at like 3:00 in the morning, and I got up at 4 to get all that stuff ready to go. So we won't do that again, but we will. Having him on from his home in Jenner, I think would be good. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, that's tough, man. To have him on not doing a show and tell feels almost a little wrong. And I can't highly recommend that video enough. By bizarre coincidence, it literally popped up in my YouTube feed last night, and I was watching again his demo, and I was just thinking, I mean, how amazing that is, the full rig, and especially when he's showing all the stabilization and all the tilting and angle and everything, and how it keeps that it keeps the perspective angle, but he can just flip it all around. It's amazing just to watch.
I will say that that the interesting thing about him is he just has lots of, a lot of on-site experience. So the little tidbits that I thought were the most interesting is him talking about load-ins and load-outs and his kit and what you do on set and how you should be in set and everything else. So I think he has a lot of other things to offer there. So I think that it'd be fun to have him on. So anyway, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think a lot of the innovation in this is the wireless stuff that it uses. It uses 4 extra 6G video lines, so you can transmit multiple video images from that rig wirelessly. And although it does seem to be, if you're using it on a football field, since it can go 360 high to low mode transition, that thing's going to stick out and somebody's going to run into it, trip over. It's going to be very dangerous on the field.
So they're using the Steadicam in the last 20 yards on both sides for a lot of the shows right now. Fox started doing that, and they were doing it, I think, with an A7S 3 or something like that. So they had these little A7s that they were doing these little Steadicams, and that's becoming more of a thing. So you'll see the shift when they get to the last 20 yards. You'll suddenly see these little coverages of everything gets short depth of field. So they're playing with this idea of doing short depth of field on the playing field. Every once in a while you see a wide shot and you see a Steadicam operator running as fast as they can off the field before they hike the ball. But it's usually during timeouts. It's during a handful of celebrations. They'll step out off the line into the field a little bit. Celebrations in the end zone. So you'll see, if you see that quick short depth of field, that's a Steadicam with some kind of Sony. I think it started with A7s, but I think they've now moved to FX6s or something like that, if I remember correctly. But someone watching maybe ought to tell us who's actually, we have some people watching and spend a lot of time in football games. So anyway, next question.
Douglas Carmichael said, with LG bringing the latest webOS to their 2022 smart TVs, would an LG TV be a better investment than a Samsung?
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm kind of funny about this. I am really trying to get my devices into two classes, smart devices and dumb, and I'm trying to favor dumb devices, and here's why. I had a situation just about a week ago where my wife was in the house. I needed to shut down content. I saw the little logo. It's on Netflix. So I went to the cable box and I tried to shut down Netflix and the thing stayed there. And then I went, oh, well, it's not coming from there. Maybe it's coming from Apple TV. And I shut down the Apple TV and it's still there. And then I went, oh, so where's it coming from? Turned out it was coming from her phone as a cast to that TV. And the problem was I had so many smart devices that had access to Netflix. I couldn't figure out where the darn thing was to shut it down. And that's when I started thinking, okay, I need less smart in a lot of my devices, so it's a clear path to where is this thing coming from, because if I see a problem with this thing, I want to know where to go to fix it. And it's getting harder and harder as there's so many versions of the same apps running on different devices, for me at least.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think this is going to be kind of a developer nightmare. It's right now, I think Samsung's using Tizen as their as their smart TV interface, and Amazon just announced that their Fire TVs are going to go transition from Android or Google-based operating system to their own, which is yet to be seen. So we'll have to see with that. And I'm kind of more bullish on Google or Android TVs versus all the rest because it's more common. It's so that the developers are more likely to put the time in to develop a well-operating app for streaming for that operating system. If LG goes webOS, that might open up a little bit more of a window for them. I'm not sure what they were using in the past. But with all these different interface platforms, the built-in streaming interface in most TVs are always pretty poor and overtaxed, and because they're doing the same processor that's processing all the image work and cleaning up the screen and doing scaling and everything else is having to operate that web interface as well. So they all are kind of sluggish and bad, and developers then have to have 5 different versions of their app to run on all the TVs that are out there. And I think it's a common interface might be better.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry about that. And yeah, I've just never been a fan of, and maybe this is an older way of thinking, I've just never been a fan of having this functionality built into the TV. I like to keep my TVs a little bit longer than 2 or 3 years. When I buy a TV, I buy big TVs, like the biggest I can fit in the room without having to bust out a wall or the doorway to get it in. So I don't want to constantly be changing that. Plus, so I'd like that functionality to be in a set-top box so that I can swap that module out. And this way I'm buying the best TV, not thinking about this separate OS thing. And, so I'm able, by the way, the Chromecast, and I have Apple TV, which is my primary device, and a Chromecast on every TV, because you can do this. And the new Chromecast, $50, this is their 4K model. You just plug it in. And this one, unlike the older ones, has an actual interface. This, by the way, cycles artwork on my screens, when I'm not watching. So I'm a big fan of separating out the two. I don't let my TVs connect to the internet at all. And I use the set-top boxes that I prefer.
Yeah, I would recommend against Samsung monitors in general. For TVs. I use Samsungs for monitors. Their 55-inch monitors are really good price performance. So they have 55-inch ones that are like $400 or $450, and they're really good as like just general use surfaces, but I wouldn't buy anything bigger than that from Samsung. LG's got a much better screen. It also supports Dolby Vision. Samsung does HDR10+, which is we're too cheap for Dolby. So I wouldn't go down the Samsung path. And I definitely would not allow my TV to talk to the internet. Like it's bad on so many levels. You should not allow your TV to talk to the internet. And it's not worth it. In addition to them gathering all that information, why do they think they want you to tie that in? They want all that data, and they're selling that data to Safeway and to everybody else. So that's what they're doing with all the data that they have. They're packaging it up. They're making money off of you watching that screen. And so if you don't want to be the product, don't plug your TV into it. In addition to that, it's not even worth it. As someone who has to stream to these pieces of junk, they're horribly underpowered. So all the chipsets in there are so underpowered compared to an Apple TV. A regular like a Samsung TV with Apple TV Plus or whatever is 1/10 the power of an Apple TV. So we have to dumb down all of our streams because of these pieces of trash. And so do not use those apps. They're horrible. You're not getting the same experiences you're getting from a set-top box. So if you're using an Apple TV or a Roku or something, you're getting a much better experience than what you're getting from the chipsets that they're putting into these TVs. Next question.
Jeff Francis in Columbia, South Carolina. HDMI fiber cables is his topic. Has anyone used one that's 100 meters long? Successful? Recommended brand?
Go ahead, Mark.
Jeff, we haven't used them that long, but we've used some longer cables, and we use the D-Tech as the brand. And the reason that's really nice is because they terminate in micro HDMI. And they give you the adapters for standard HDMI. So if you need to fit them through a conduit or any small space, it's a lot easier to run the cables. Just make sure you run the right end because they're one direction.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, fiber is nice for long runs, but it's fairly delicate. So if you're going to be running it in a permanent installation, you can't make any hard right corners, et cetera. You have to do, smooth curves to change direction. And if you're using it in something portable where you're just running out a cable to a monitor somewhere where people are going to be stepping on it, and people are going to be rolling casters over the top of it, it's not going to last very long. So I'd be careful about running fiber HDMI over a long distance where you don't have complete control over the path that it travels.
Yeah, I would build a more generalized solution. So the fiber HDMI cables are really expensive. Fiber itself is not when you buy it by the roll. So what we do is we buy a roll of 1,000 feet. Now you can get those terminated as well. We buy them from Clark Cable, I think, but you can get a roll, and it comes with a little spool and everything else that you can roll it up on. And it's just terminating into LC typically. I like ST myself because it's more like a BNC. You can plug it in and tie it in. But then what you do is then you get Blackmagic makes them. I have a tendency to use Lynx yellow bricks, but they're a converter on each end of that fiber. Now, the converters, you want to take, they're a little bit more expensive. You want to keep them. But I think that if you're talking especially about 100 meters, the cost of that 100 meter of HDMI fiber reel will be the same as getting some adapters on either end and the regular fiber. And if anything happens at fiber in the middle, with the HDMI fiber, you're going to have to buy it again. With these ones, you just get new fiber, and the fiber is not very expensive, and we've run fiber, HDMI, and SDI, 4K, over 1,000 feet. So it's, I think it's rated for a mile or something like that, or more. So you can do it for a very long distance over that. So I would think about a more generalized thing. I do think that up to about 100 feet, a lot of these HDMI fiber cables make sense. They're more convenient. They everything else. But as soon as I go longer than that, I'm going to buy converters on both ends and then stick it in there, because that way anything happens in the middle, I don't feel as bad. Next question.
Next one comes from Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach here on the panel. Any thoughts on Dropbox Replay versus Frame.io for teams heavily invested in Dropbox?
I think if you're doing it internally, I think that the Dropbox Relay is okay if you're sending to people. I will say that there is it shouldn't be this way, but people definitely make decisions about how big their company is and how reliable they are based on what links they send them. So if you send a client a Google Drive link or a Dropbox link, they're going to make a certain decision about you, like about where you fit into that food chain. Whereas if you send a Frame link, you're kind of in the middle. It's not that you're great, because of if they send you if you send someone a media link or a Aspera, then they go, oh, that's a big company. So that's like that's because it's expensive. If you send Frame, you're kind of like middle of the road. Everyone you're what everybody expects. And Dropbox is going to be a step below Frame. And again, this is the visibility of how people perceive you when you send it to them. And that's important for some, in some cases. Most production teams I know are using Frame to deliver this stuff, and they have oftentimes multiple teams on those and everything else. And so if you send, your Google Drive link is probably considered the lowest. Like people will just go, well, they're getting started. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
So I've dropped almost everything. I got out of Dropbox early because the hooks that it put into the deepest levels of my system were so persistent, and it was really hard to get it off my system, and it was causing some problems. I migrated to Frame. I was with Frame for years, but they just recently had a pretty significant price increase on everything, and I don't really have to do that kind of work enough to justify it. So now I'm keeping my eyes on Matt Simiglia's company, Alteon, which it appears to be coming along, and I'm using it as what I used Frame.io for. Again, I'm doing less big collaborative work with large teams than I used to, but I just think I'm leery of getting into those things unless you're a constant user, in which case I agree with Alex that, people didn't know about Frame for years, and then everybody said, yeah, you can only just send it to your Frame account. And so it's just getting some weight there, but it is more costly than it was when I was using it by a good chunk.
Good, Chris.
My biggest fear with Dropbox, and I'm very curious about this, and yes, I understand Alex's, got to be a cool kid comment, is that a few years ago, somebody in our organization accidentally upgraded us to Dropbox Pro or Dropbox Enterprise, whatever. Okay, it may have been me, but it was really annoying because we couldn't get out of it. It was like the worst divorce ever to try and separate ourselves from that thing. I will say that at its basic level, it works. Get normal Dropbox. We really lean on it, but I'm curious to hear more about Replay.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Kevin Graham in Rochester, New York. Can you recommend a product that allows multiple headphones to connect to the TV or media system, Apple TV, Chromecast, and Roku, so that I can watch movies with other people in surround sound?
Good, Courtney, real quick.
Well, you're going to have to find something like maybe the Behringer 1-4. It's analog in, analog out for headphones. It'll probably do the trick for you.
I don't think it'll do surround, though.
Well, surround is going to have to be rendered into 2 channels. So, if you're going to be listening on headphones, it's got to be rendered first.
The best way to listen with so everyone can hear and surround in the same room is to put it in speakers. I know it sounds crazy, but there's this thing called speakers, and they work, and then everybody in the room hears the same thing. I don't quite understand why you would want to have everybody on headsets all in the same place. But although I will say I saw a movie that way where they did all binaural. So they gave us all headsets. There was 300 of us sitting there watching a movie in binaural, which was, I admit, kind of cool. Yeah, Chris, 10 seconds.
I wish I could listen on AirPods when everybody else is on speaker so I can set my own volume.
There you go. I just said it really loud. So anyway, we're going to be talking about Ambisonic here in just a second. But just a quick reminder that we have tomorrow we talk about compression. So we'll talk about how we make big videos into small videos and what those issues are, whether it's resolution or long GOP or short GOP, or the types of compression that we use to make that actually happen, and what are the tools that we use. So stay tuned for that. On Friday, we'll talk about backhaul. How do we get the signal from one place to another, which oftentimes involves compression. So they're kind of related to each other. So we're going to be doing that there. And also a quick reminder that we have a panel meeting on Saturday. So if you're already a panelist, 9 a.m. on Saturday, and we'll put that post out on Discord. Welcome back to the second hour, and we're going to be talking about Ambisonics and recording Ambisonics, and a little bit of an overview. And if any of our panelists want to jump in to talk about this a little bit, they can. Just raise your hand. And if you've got questions about Ambisonic, we'll do the best we can to answer them. I will not claim that I am an expert in Ambisonic, but I know a little bit about it, and I've been playing with it a fair bit. The main thing is that I think that it's important for us to keep on paying attention to Ambisonic, because it's probably one of the better ways to field record something that you may use in surround in the future. So it's a little bit more built on it. Ambisonic is actually really old. And so one of the advantages to Ambisonic is that it is past all of its patents and anything else that's there. There's nothing there, as well as but the disadvantage is, of course, there's a lot of different versions of it. So what we want to do is start talking about some of the basics of what Ambisonic looks like, because again, it's not the only way to record surround. There's lots of ways of doing that. There's lots of ways of capturing stuff, and we may talk about those in the future. But it's a relatively compact way to do it. And one of the things that's really important is that, again, as we look at the Vision Pro, what we're going to see, we're seeing tons of headsets. The Vision Pro, the Meta, Meta's going to keep on putting out things that it's working there. And it's important for us as media developers to at least understand how Ambisonic works and how we might be able to use it in our production, because we are going to be asked to do this in the next couple of years. If you're doing sound work, someone's going to ask you to put that together. Yeah, Jeff, you wanted to throw a couple notes in.
Yeah, we should talk about the fact that Ambisonic is a format. It's a 360-degree format for recording sound. So whereas stereo is a left-right, this is a 360-degree version. So there is the ability to store audio in Ambisonics. There's the ability to capture sound from an Ambisonic mic, but it doesn't have to stay that way through the entire chain. So you can use an Ambisonic mic to get material for typical surround or even for stereo, or you can work from tracks that never had an Ambisonic mic and you can produce content in Ambisonic format. But Ambisonic format as a delivery is not a common thing unless you're talking about 360 video, and then that pairs really well with that, because as you move your viewpoint, the Ambisonic 360 sound field can shift with your viewpoint very easily.
Right. And even if we're delivering something in, let's say, 5.1 or into other things like that, the advantage of Ambisonic is that it's a relatively compact recorder that allows us to deliver those back. So, for instance, to give you a sense of what we do for some of the event coverage that we do, we're playing around with doing Ambisonic, but what we're doing is we're actually streaming it to you in 5.1. So we're streaming to YouTube in 5.1, but we're recording Ambisonic because we've got a nice little Ambio mic. So Sennheiser makes an Ambio mic. I don't know if I should have grabbed that image. But the Sennheiser makes an Ambio mic. Now, typically, Ambio, the first order of your first order is what would typically be seen as a your first order is an Omni, and then you have and that's, I believe, W, and then you have X, Y, and Z. So X is forward, back, Y is side to side, and Z is up and down. Are the four channels inside of a first order. And when you record it, it is in the format is the A format. That is just the actual the A format is what's actually hitting the mics. You're not going to use that for anything. That's just the mics hitting it. And in a first order, you have in a first order you'll have four mics. Oh, you can have multiple ones, but what we typically see is 4 mics. And we're seeing that in a lot. Jeff has a great and then that's the B format. What I just described is the B format. So the B format is what the A format gets converted to, so that it can, and then it's processed from there. So it's treated. You're not really. The A format is just what came to the mics. The B format is what it gets converted into, and that's really putting it into that spherical space. The problem, of course, with first order is resolution. So you can feel it, but it's not going to be, if two things are close to each other in front of you, you're not going to be able to feel necessarily the difference of exactly where they are. You're not going to be able to pinpoint that. As we start to add more mics, we start to add more resolution. So that as we have more mics in the A format and we convert those to the B format, you can have first order, second order, third order, fourth order. And what you're ending up with is, I think the sixth order is like 64 mics, so to give you a sense of it, that are all coming in. And that's going to give you a much higher resolution to work with, where you can start to really pinpoint these things. And these mics go from, the least expensive mic is the Zoom mic. Zoom makes a little one. I have one behind me. I'll try to grab it when someone else is talking here. But the Zoom mic is a couple $100s. There we go. I think that Jeff has a couple of the images up here, maybe that he'll show there. So here are a couple of the mics here, and these are all first order mics. So you have these, and what they're doing is that they're being grabbed and then they're being added and subtracted from each other to build the B format that you're going to then use in what you're doing. These are that's first order, and then second order you're going to and so you see the second order that are there, and you'll see that the additional mics, which is going to provide additional resolution, and then third order. I don't know if you have third order there or higher orders.
The left one with the gold is the second order, and then the other two are third order.
Oh, third order. Okay, great. Yeah. So there's second order and then third orders there. So you can see how they're increasing the number of mics that we have there. And when we are going to go to NAMM for at least a day, and when we do that, we'll try to track some of these down for you to see them. But as you start to increase that, now again, the advantage here is that it's not recording this in beds. So this isn't like a 5.1 mix or a 5.14 mix or a 7.14 or 9.16. This is just a sound field of all of these sounds that are calculated. And of course that allows us then to convert it down into we can go in there and convert that to 5.1. So a couple things to think about. So the way we're using this in our event coverage is very specific to what we think is important. So the problem is that of course you don't pinpoint it, and if everything's even, it's really hard to understand what people are saying. So what we do is we have an ambisonic mic that's up high that's kind of grabbing everything around us, and then our hosts have 2 mics that are they're talking to each other, right? These ones are being delivered as a separate set of channels. So if we have 2 channels here, we'll be delivering back 6 channels of audio. That's the format A, which is the 4 mics that are coming out of the Ambisonic mic, as well as two individual mics. The cool thing about that is that now we have control over the ambient sound, and we also have control, and with those mics, if they're like we are using SM58s, so their off-axis rejection is very high. So they're really kind of almost on their own. And what we can do then is in 5.1, we can set those on the center track. So we can set those in the center channel. So we're giving you these mics in the center channel so that we're nice and clear. But what the Ambio allows us to do is then take that environmental sound and mix that into the feed so that you really feel like you're there and you can hear things around you. And I find it to be very immersive. Like when you're at a location, when you're at an event doing this, I find it to be, you feel more like you're there if someone has the surround that's there. Remember, that can be folded, that can be sent to 5.1, 5.14, all these different things, but it can also be all the way down to binaural to be a delivery, as a delivery mechanism. So those are some of the options that we use there. A couple of things that you have to be careful of is, number one, these are things you have to think about when you're recording, because this is what we wanted to cover a little bit here. Number one is you're recording those 4 tracks. Those are 4 raw. There's no format that's necessary. Now, if you want to listen to it in binaural, you may need to have a recorder. So I believe that the Mix Pre 6 and the Mix Pre 10 will both process what's coming in as a first order ambisonic into binaural, so you can actually listen to it while you're recording it. And so that's and what's interesting, by the way, is that I was watching some videos yesterday, getting ready for today, and one of the things they're talking about is, sometimes you'll see binaural recordings where there's a big head in the center and then there's ears, and they put the mics into the ears. And they said that's good, but the advantage of the ambisonic is it's capturing everything around it, and then you can build those simulators to do that as well. It gives you a little bit more flexibility from a binaural. And I talked to there's the binaural head, and that one's I think that's the Neumann. Is that the Neumann head? I think that's like 10 grand.
That is Fritz, yes.
Oh,
the
Fritz,
Neumann head.
Fritz, the Neumann head. Yeah, that's like 10 grand. So anyway, so the advantage that we're doing is we're kind of mixing and matching those to get the effects that we want. And again, this is a nice compact system that you can take out and record those. But any recorder that has, if you're doing first order, you don't have to have a special recorder other than something that can handle the 4 tracks. So you bring those 4 tracks in and you're going to record them together. Obviously, you got to make sure that the gain is the same, or be very careful about matching gain on your record so that everything is exactly the same as you bring those inputs in. The other thing you have to do is make sure that you're not turning your mic. So the Sennheiser, for instance, has this is front, and there's a logo on the front of the Sennheiser. That's not by accident. You have to keep that logo pointed forward. Otherwise, you're going to start moving that sphere around, and you can move the sphere later, but you can't. It's harder to keep animating it. So you really want to figure out what's consistent there. And generally, what you consider front needs to have that logo, or needs to be decided. You have to test it. Usually, when we take this out, there's a lot of careful testing. So when we take this out into the field, Mickey's on the other end and he's listening to it, and we talk. We go to the front, go to the side, go to this side, go to the back. Make sure that we know that our channels are correct in what we're delivering back to the mix. Now, the way that we do this for a live event is you can get embedders. It's relatively easy to get embedders for up to 8 channels. And so what we do is we can take these files, we can put them on. Even the live view will take those 8 channels and send them back. So basically, what we can do is take the 4 Format A Ambisonic channels along with the 2 mics, embed those using a Blackmagic embedder. We embed those into an SDI signal, put the SDI signal into the live view, send it back home. That's where it gets mixed. We're not trying to mix it in the field. So it gets mixed on the far end, which listening, watching it later and listening to it, I think it's pretty profound. It makes a huge difference for locations to have this. And again, you're going to see more and more demand picking up as more of the VR, headsets start to pick up speed. It's not just that Apple is doing a VR headset because it's expensive. There won't be that many of them. But if you look at the number of announcements that happened over at NAB related to headsets and immersive, Apple has, like they often do, kind of opened up a gate. Is that gate going to stay open? We never know. We don't know if 3D will continue. We don't know if VR will continue. But the next 2 or 3 years will be fun for those of us who are producers, if you know how to do these things. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
This is developing so rapidly, and I mentioned it before, but there's a place in San Diego that was just built called the Rady Shell. It's a concert venue, and I've been fascinated by that. Probably the best single concert sound I have ever heard. We were there for the symphony, and I took this picture, and I'm going to zoom way in, and you can see what they're doing in terms of the number of mics above the orchestra, capturing multiple perspectives.
But what I'll say, that I don't want to confuse people watching that. That's not Ambisonic, though.
No, I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying...
We have to be careful. I don't want to get multi-mic stuff.
Overall, the point of this is that they're capturing so much more information in terms of height, depth, whatever, that they can use in the future as they decide to mix things differently. There are also mics on stands inside for the lower perspective and things like that.
I don't want to cut you off because I just don't want to confuse people about multiple mic. So the Ambisonic mic is a very specific thing. I just want to talk about that today because I just want to make sure that we're talking about that process. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
So if you've used MS mic technique you kind of have an idea of the baby sibling of Ambisonic. So MS uses a forward-facing mic. Here is a cardioid shown in black, and a sideways-facing bidirectional mic that will give you stereo in one plane. And what Ambisonics does is, besides having a left-right facing bidirectional mic, they add a forward-back facing bidirectional mic and an up-down facing bidirectional mic. And those four, along with, instead of a cardioid for the center, they use an Omni. That's the four WXYZ that Alex was talking about. Those give you pressure and then direction in three planes, orthogonal, left, right, up, down, front, back. The problem is we can't fit four microphones in one space, and that's why we've gone to these strange tetrahedron mics that need to be decoded. And then if you want to get more resolution, we go up into larger numbers of microphones. So second order, third order, fourth order, all that. But it's generally allows you to steer this the way you can steer MS. You can steer now in 3 dimensions. And that's the idea behind Ambisonics as a capture. The thing to really remember is it is still coincident. All of those mics are designed to be at the same point in space, or otherwise you cannot do this. So it's still a coincident technique. It's one point in space that you're capturing, which has benefits because you're allowed to play with microphones and mix them and do all this crazy processing. It also has drawbacks that it has no spatial separation, so we get no time of arrival information in our stereo or surround, which can be useful sometimes.
Although there are some simulators I was looking at, and I haven't used them, that can simulate that time of arrival to, put something in it to make that calculation, because that audio is in a sphere and it isn't recorded that way, but it can do that. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, another recorder you might consider for doing what Alex was talking about, where you want to record ambisonic with an ambisonic microphone, as well as maybe a couple of lavs or maybe a stereo pair above the orchestra, is the Zoom F6. Besides the Zoom microphone, which we showed earlier, which looks like a little pyramid, this is just a recorder, and you can use channels 1 through 4 for an ambisonic feed, and it will decode that to AB format for your headphones, so you can kind of listen to it. But then you can record channel 5 and 6 as independent channels that are part of that poly file. And so that later you can mix the stereo pair or your lavs in with the ambisonic field, which is contained in channels 1 through 4.
The complicated part has been, for us, has been the reinsertion for live has not been trivial, and it really is kind of a Sound Devices 8 series problem, which is I'm using a Scorpio for that, and there's not that many things below that can grab those mixes and then recompact them into a format that we can put them live into the and so it's there's not that many things that will output those 4 channels into a format that we can use, and that's been one of our challenges as far as that goes, because a lot of our embedders need to get it as AES. So the embedder that will do it needs to be delivered as AES, and that turns into a little bit of a pipeline more than just a. But for recording, you're absolutely right. And again,
that's only a live problem, because recording, you're playing it back, so you can decode it as you wish.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Robert Soji in Los Angeles. Can a live classical concert performance be properly captured, with only one Ambisonics mic?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Properly captured, perhaps, but it would make it. I think depending upon how you render it, if you put the good mic placement in like 5th row center in front of a properly laid out orchestra that is laid out in standard classical, arrangement. Where all the instruments are in their correct spaces, it'd be like sitting in the venue and listening to it, probably. But I think Ambisonic, I don't know, you run around some problems if you're mixing for headphones. Depends on whether you're mixing for headphones or 5.1 or speakers, or how you're going to decode it. Depends on whether it's going to be accurately rendered as if you were sitting there. Probably not a good choice for a classical recording, because you have no control over it. If if the strings are not loud enough, you can't do anything about it later.
If only we had someone that has done classical recording. Oh, well, Jeff.
Captured, yes. Properly captured, satisfyingly captured, I would say no. I've never found a strictly coincident mic technique to be satisfying to listen to. We're giving up half of how we perceive localization. Our ears use both amplitude through head shadowing and time of arrival. Microphones tend to use amplitude rather than head shadowing unless you have a baffle technique. But getting some separation between the mics adds time of arrival information, which is very pleasing, gives us spaciousness, gives us an enveloping sense, even just in stereo, and also can make a less than stellar sounding concert hall sound better because you actually will get additional reflections because sidewall reflections are now arriving at the two mics at different times, so you're increasing actually the reflections of the room. So I like spaced mics. Also, going to pure pressure omnidirectional microphones gets you flat frequency response. Now, the subcardioid capsules in the first order Ambisonics mics approach this. They're not as poor of low end frequency response as cardioids are, but they're not as good.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, that's actually why I had that other picture up. It was because I was thinking to myself, where do you put it? If you have a big orchestra like this, the position of any kind of Ambisonics mic is going to be substantially farther away from the timpani, for example, even though they're louder, or from the third violins.
I don't think Ambisonic is probably how you want to record a band or a that type of thing. I think that the big advantage, though, is that when you're doing environmental work, and again, there's going to be a strong desire to grab more environmental information. I think that it's not going to just be. I think that there's not going to. I think there's a place for instance, people just going and capturing data as Ambisonic. So, for instance, I'm going to be going around sampling some stuff over next week that I'm sampling some city areas, some location areas. I'm going to go on a boat. I'm going to do a couple other things. But I think that eventually that becomes stock recordings. These are like, I want to create an environment of being at the ocean, or I want to create an environment that is being here. And I may be able to mix that into something else I'm doing. And that Ambisonic recording is something that's very compact and easy to do and easy to walk around and do in a way that is difficult when you start adding a bunch of mics. But I think you're right. We wouldn't record a band that way or an orchestra. I would record that. You want those as separated as you possibly can. In fact, when we've done some of the surround stuff we did, we even took the drums away. So they had electronic drums. And so all you heard is, and you heard blink, 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 blink. And then you heard nothing. All you could hear is the person singing, which really stands out if they're not on tune. And because they're all by themselves. But in headphones, you could hear everything. But but that gave us it allowed us to separate out all those tracks and then move the instruments and wherever we want to. Go ahead, Jeff.
To answer Bill about the multi-mic question, there are some very satisfying classical concerts that are simply two microphones, one to the left and one to the right channel. They're not Ambisonics.
Right. Now go ahead, Courtney.
Okay.
Right, and I was wondering,
perfectly balanced orchestra in two microphones, if they're in the right position and it's a well conducted orchestra.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And I was going to ask Jeff, because I know nothing about the different rendering of Ambisonic, because I would think it would record the sound field equally from the front and the back in 360 degrees. And if you're playing it back or rendering it for headphones, your ears are normally directional. If you're playing it back for speakers, your ears, the pinnas on your ears, filter out a lot of stuff from the back. That's how we get our directionality of that. And as you mentioned earlier, the head shadow and the time of flight or delivery to one ear versus the other ear. But if you're delivering through headphones where the time of flight and head shadow don't really come into play, how do you render? Is there a different renderer for rendering for headphone listening versus rendering for four speakers equally placed around you?
Next question.
You would render for binaural, which would take into account the head-related transfer function. So it would create a left ear signal and a right ear signal, the left ear signal having the head shadowing and pinnicus and things encoded into it from a generic average human head.
So it would synthesize the frequency delay and the frequency response for the back channels. So psychoacoustically.
That's what any binaural renderer tries to do, is to simulate that, and that's that head-related transfer function.
Gotcha.
Next question.
Next one comes from Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado. Do you see any Ambisonic recording rigs at CES?
I didn't I didn't see a lot of announcements related to those. At CES. I expect to see a bunch of stuff at NAMM. So I bet you we'll see 5, 6, 7, 8 rigs, different mics that do ambisonic. And one of the reasons that we're talking about it today is for people to think about it and to do some research on it and know that when we go to NAMM, we're definitely going to pay a lot of attention to ambisonic when we get there. Next question.
Next one comes from Craig Kadoki in Toronto. Has anyone tried 2 Austrian Audio OC818s in ambisonic configuration?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I have not, and I'm just starting to look at this when I saw this question. The Austrian Audio uses 2 capsules in each microphone and has an app to allow you to change the polar pattern of the microphones. But I think in this you would get ambisonics, or you would at least get steering in the flat plane in 2 dimensions, but may not get height out of that unless you had a third upward-facing microphone. But I need to research that a little more.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I'm curious about how, how that looks. Hold on. Sorry, I got a bunch of error messages there from their website. This is what they're talking about here. Is they can Ambi Creator, which is their open source ambisonic plugin. They say that you can create ambisonic B format, which we now know what it is. It's not the A format, it's the B format, from 2 of these microphones, which they do sell as a pair. It'd be interesting to test them. I think that I don't think they'll be as good as a regular ambisonic mic as far as directionality, but they could be very high quality microphones themselves. Go ahead, Jeff.
They are. These are Austrian Audio is some of the people from Neumann who left Neumann and created this company. So they are high quality microphones. They do say that this is 360 degrees in a horizontal plane. So you're not going to get full 3-dimensional ambisonics unless you add a third upward, downward facing microphone.
And again,
this is essentially double MS, which is a forward facing and a rear facing MS.
When you think about, like, I want to convert this to 5.1, that'd be fine. Because 5.1 is delivering at a plane. If you're delivering to 5.1.4, that would be not fine. So like if you wanted to go to YouTube or something like this, these 2 mics might give you a really good signal that was just giving you that information. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
The practicality of that microphone is where it starts to fall down, because now you have 2 large diaphragm microphones that you have to stack on top of each other at 90 degrees. So just getting that on a stand like you want to use it to carry around with you that's where Ambisonics, the 4 tetrahedron mic, is a very compact system, and that's its advantage.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana. Can the B format audio be combined to create virtual microphones in real time if the latency can be accounted for, or is latency necessarily not an issue in driving virtual mics?
I just wouldn't know exactly what you're trying to do there. Go ahead, Jeff.
This is a great question, Roscoe, and this is something we mentioned when we were talking about topics about using Ambisonics in live streaming and how we can decode it on the fly. And that's not something I've tried to do yet. But if you can decode it, you can mix other microphones with it, and then you could later encode that back to an Ambisonics or a binaural or a 5.1 signal, however you like.
And if you're talking about... Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
The plugins don't have a great amount of latency to them, so I think that's doable.
And if you're talking about pointing a mic at a certain location and getting that thing that's there in front of it, you probably could do that, except again, in the first order, you're not that accurate. It's like somewhere in that forward area, so you could theoretically pull some stuff out. I was reading an article about this, getting ready for today, that was someone talking about sometimes people will convert to ambisonic to then focus on a certain thing that they recorded to, like they'll have a stereo image and they convert to ambisonic and then they can pull something out of it and then convert it back, which seemed like to do kind of what you're trying to do, but of course it's not live. Next question. Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Robert,
before we go to the next question. Go ahead, Jeff. Sure.
I'll just give an example of one time an Ambisonics mic kind of saved me a little bit. I was doing some composer readings sessions. So it was a classical sextet. It was violin, 2 violins, viola, cello, and they had a piano, and I think they had a little percussion marimba. So typical string quartet with piano behind it. And I had, a stereo pair on these, and that was fine. And I decided at the last moment, let me throw up an Ambisonics mic so I can have some. I have an Ambio, and it was like some test recordings. And we got to the last piece, and it was actually just a violin duo. And so the two violins are sitting on the left side of things. And all of a sudden, they asked, "Do you want us to change chairs?" And before I could chime in, they're like, "No, we'll just stay here." So all of a sudden I had this one recording that was everybody was just sitting on the left side of the microphones. Okay. But by using the Ambisonics mic, I could steer a stereo pair and just turn it towards these two players. And so I had captured those 4 tracks, and very easily in post-production on that particular one, I could steer over to where they were. So it saved me in that thing of not having to go move microphones around when there was no time.
That's great. It's a very good example. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, what would you recommend as an entry-level toolkit for working with Ambisonics?
I think we skipped one there. There's one above that, Robert Soji.
Okay, Robert Soji, Los Angeles. Are there any advantages of the Sennheiser over the Rode Ambisonics mic?
I have the Sennheiser. I don't have the Rode. Jeff, have you used both?
I've only used the Sennheiser.
Yeah.
I like that the Sennheiser actually has a pop covering over the top of it as opposed to exposed microphone capsules. But
my experience of Rode mics in general, and I have a Rode mic right here. That's a shotgun, and I was testing this pod mic. This is their new pod mic, USB or whatever. There's a lot of self sound, there's a lot of noise, self noise in these. This one and the shotgun mic and everything else. I think it's I'm not certain, but I'm not knowing Rode in general. I think that the Sennheiser is going to be quieter, just from my experience of all the Rode mics I've ever had. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, what would you recommend as an entry-level toolkit for working with Ambisonics?
Well, the first thing that I would look at getting is the Zoom recorder. That's the best entry level. That's $250 or something like that. I got one. I've been playing with it. It's great. I mean, it's a little noisy, in the same sense that it's a lot more noisy than the Sennheiser is, but it's super compact, and you're going to be able to record it. And then there are a variety of Ambisonic processors that you can get for your app. What's interesting is, and Jeff Cohen left, so I was going to point it out, that when I was researching for today, evidently Reaper has a bunch of stuff kind of built into it to do Ambisonic. So you may want to look at Reaper as a way to do that process, or then you're going to need to find a plugin to do it, whether you're doing it in Logic or Pro Tools or other things to do that processing of Ambisonic. I'm going to guess that Logic may update more things around Ambisonic related to the fact that Apple is going to want to use it more and more as a production tool for delivering to the Vision Pro. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I'm going to thank Mickey for chiming in the chat. The Deer VR suite is a good set of tools. Facebook used to have a great set of 360 tools that still run as plugins, but I don't know that they're available anymore because they've kind of end-of-lifed that. But they had a great set of 360 tools, converting Ambisonics, up converters, down converters, panners, binaural renderers, all kinds of things.
Yeah, and definitely expect to see us do some labs related to this. So one of the reasons I'm going out to record is not so much that I need to record. I want to go out and gather some content so that we can actually play with it in some either labs or workshops that we do in the not too distant future to get ready for that. So we'll be kind of slowly piecing that together, because our goal is to make sure that there's a lot of people in our community that understand how to record it and how to shoot it and how to actually produce something with it. Next question.
Jack Ruppel, Breckenridge, Colorado. Ambisonics Capture output to 714 or binaural or Apple Spatial?
I think, yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
So if you have a Ambisonic signal, that 4-channel or higher order signal, it can be out. You can render out of it as many channels as you want in different directions. So 7.1.4 is not a problem. Again, whether you like the mix you got if you started from and are just dealing with a single Ambisonics mic capture that now comes out as 7.1.4. That's another thing. But this could again come from just a bunch of tracks that you're mixing to 7.1.4, or you're mixing to an Ambisonic format and then converting to that.
Yeah, go. Next question.
Next question comes from Michael Graves in Houston, Texas. Does anyone have any experience with higher order Ambisonics?
I have a higher order mic here, then I just haven't. I'm missing a cable that I have to figure out how to get it out. It's a little bit more processing because, now delivering 8 channels, it's one thing to have the Ambio with 4. The 8 is a little bit more complicated, and so there's a processor involved with that. So working on getting all that working, but it is. I haven't played with it as much. Go ahead, Jeff.
Which mic is it?
The Octa.
Okay. I have not used any of the higher orders. The ones that go beyond the second order tend to be a bunch of omnidirectional capsules. Typically, they tend to be very noisy, like the MEMS type mics, which are what is used in phones. And they're mounted on a little sphere, and then there's quite a bit of post-processing to create the higher order signal, and those are usually a single USB capture. So they are basically the audio interface in amongst themselves, and they may have 64 channels going out, and then you need to capture that and then process that. And the problem, that becomes very difficult to integrate into any other system because they are not XLR microphones that you can mix with anything else. It is the only audio interface.
This is the one that I need to kind of get more into testing here. So there you go. Next question.
Robert Soji, Los Angeles. How do you properly monitor a live Ambisonics recording with headphones?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I assume the Scorpio has a decoder for headphones
Doesn't.
built into them. It doesn't?
No,
Well, the Zoom F6 has an AB decoder built into it for monitoring, and it also, gangs together the levels for them so that you can adjust them all aligns all the levels for the 4 channels.
And I should be more accurate. I should say
does.
it didn't. I don't know if it does
Maybe
now, but I
could've,
believe
yeah.
that the Mix Pre's did it, and the 8 series didn't when they first came out, and I haven't gone back to look at it. So it could have, they could have changed that, but I know the Mix Pre's had it built in. They do have it built in, and it'll fold down to binaural.
And I think most, like the Zoom Ambisonics microphone, probably has a decoder built into it if it has a headphone output.
It does. It does do binaural. So the little Zoom one, it is will definitely do that. Next question.
Jack Ruppel, Breckenridge, Colorado. Ambisonics capture of human range and acoustic emissions beyond human hearing. Visualized on VR headset, i.e. Vision Pro. Thoughts?
I would love to put the what is it, the C100K, the Sank. I would love to build an Ambisonic mic with that. I don't even know what happened there, but it would be fun. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I guess Jack is wanting us to visualize ultrasonic frequencies as vision. I don't know that I want to see what my dog can hear.
Yeah. Symphony for your dog.
Next question.
Next question comes from Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. Can a mid-size configuration, in a mid-side configuration, are the side mics wired out of phase?
Go, Jeff.
So in MS, there are not side mics. There is only a single side microphone, and it is bidirectional. So it has 2 lobes, a front. So this is a sideways facing bidirectional. It's facing to the left. Shown there is the blue mic, and there is a lobe to the front, and there is a lobe to the rear, and it generally rejects sound at 90 degrees to that lobe. So when decoding, that side mic is put to the left channel, positive polarity, and it decodes out a green mic there that you can kind of see. And then when you put it to the right channel, it is inverted in polarity and mixed with the M mic, and that gives you the right signal. And so that's what gives you the virtual decode of these 2 microphones, is the center mic, the M mic, combined with the normal polarity S mic gives you the left, and the center mic combined with the reverse polarity S mic gives you the right. But there is only a single side mic. There is one M and one S, two mics that gives you two virtual outputs in a standard MS decode.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, right. He explained it correctly. The side mic is a single diaphragm, but it's combining the sound from both sides, hitting that diaphragm. So technically it's always out of phase because sound coming from this side pushes the diaphragm this way, sound coming from this side pushes the diaphragm this way, and the output is that combination out of phase technically.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'll ask you maybe to say out of polarity rather than out of phase, because phase is a much more complex topic that deals with time. We're talking about polarity, which is a binary issue.
180 degrees out of phase is polarity difference. Yeah, out of polarity.
Only for a sine wave. Only for a sine wave.
I stand corrected by the expert.
One of these basics this year, we're just going to have a whole thing that's just phase versus polarity. Like, we're just going to talk about it. We're going to get it. I'm not kidding. Like, one of these basics, we're just going to talk about that and make sure everybody's got it sorted out.
The most misused term in audio of all time.
Absolutely. Next question.
Jack Ruppel, Breckenridge, Colorado. Zoom H3 VR content edited in DaVinci Fairlight for Apple Vision Pro?
Yeah, we're going to be doing more research in this area, so stay tuned. This is the beginning of us talking about it, but expect us to be talking about how we produce this in Pro Tools, in Logic, in Resolve. We're going to be looking at how to do this because I do think that there's going to be a big request for it, and people who can do it will stand out among people who can just do stereo. Next question.
Paul Buchanan, Douglas Carmichael, how would you encode the ambisonic content for the Vision Pro?
We are going to be talking about that in the future. so this is exactly getting this all encoded in there. There's a couple Apple videos about how they want you to do it and how to record it and how to post it there. But expect us to be, the Vision Pro is coming out. I'm going to be there at 5 a.m. trying to get one. We'll see if I actually end up with a Vision Pro or not. Anyway, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you've probably done a lot more research on this, Alex, than any of us. Does the Vision Pro have a stereo pair of microphones for pickup for its recording?
I don't know. I think it does. I think it has some kind of recording because it does record video in stereo, and I'm going to guess that it records mics in stereo as well, but or some kind of field there, and I actually don't know. So it's about what it can record. I do know that you have the option of using. You can put headsets on, actually. You can put the AirPod Maxes or whatever over top of it as well. So to get even more immersive, especially if you're going, one of the first places I'll test it is in a plane. like so watching something and being somewhere.
The headphones that are built into it are down firing little speakers that are in the band. Is that what
I think so. I'm not 100% sure.
They don't go in your ears.
I think so. Yeah. I don't think that something goes into your ears unless you put it in there, but I'm not 100% sure. So that'll be something that we'll know soon. Next question.
Paul Buchan in Columbus, Ohio. When you did the test at NAB, can you explain the signal flow from capture to stream?
Yeah, we did this at NAB, and we also did it at SIGGRAPH last year, and we'll do it again. We're going to probably test it if I can get all the components where they need to be. We'll test it at NAMM and then at NAB again. And so the way we did this here is we had an Ambio that delivered 4 channels to a Scorpio. So the Ambio did 4 channels to a sound device's Scorpio. We got 2 more channels that were wireless. So these were they were SM58s to electrosonic transmitters to go back to the Scorpio as well. Those were then delivered as cleanly as we could. They were converted. The first 4 channels in the Scorpio can be output AES over the right and left outputs on the far side, and so those were converted to into one. Those first 4 channels were recorded into 2 TRSs that went into a Blackmagic audio to SDI. The last one we had to get this big. There's a large connector that we would connect to it. Hiroshi connector, I believe. I always get them anyway. And then basically it converted the other 2 AES channels, or up to 4 more AES channels, but we only need 1 more, and we put that into or 2 more. So we put that into that embedder. That embedded it to the SDI signal. The SDI signal was then delivered to the live view. The live view was sent sent back to San Rafael. That was then brought out, and then it was processed in Pro Tools. And it wasn't DearVR and the other one that Mickey will probably put in the comments, but I can never remember the name of it. Anyway, so and then that's processed back to 5.1. That was then delivered as an 8-channel signal back into our encoder. That was an elemental encoder that went to the AWS, and AWS delivered it to YouTube. And that was that was 4K HDR delivered to YouTube. So it's HDR10 as well as 4K as well as 5.1. And I thought it was pretty impressive. I thought it looked really good. So expect us to do more experiments with there. We know that that's pretty far out there, but we think it's worth continuing to experiment with. So stay tuned for more of that. We are going to try to do our attempt at the Eclipse, which will be slightly before NAB, will be to do some of the Ambisonic in one location, along with an HDR of the Eclipse in 4K. We're going to try to deliver that and see what. I think we'll be the only ones in the world doing that. so we'll see how that looks as well. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I just did some quick research. It looks like Vision Pro has 6 microphones built into it.
Well, there you go. So it'll potentially grab. It'll be the new filming, like someone just walking around filming with, like, just looking around like this, looking around and doing it. It won't look odd at all. I'm sure it'll be just fine. Anyway, that's the introduction to Ambisonic. Again, our goal is that we're going to keep on talking about this. We're going to bring some. Watch this if hopefully you watch this here. You ask the questions that you needed to. We're going to bring people on that do Ambisonic. What I wanted to do is have an internal discussion and kind of create a baseline for understanding Ambisonic, so that when we bring guests on that do a lot of Ambisonic work, that we at least have some of the basics figured out there. So that's what this video is designed to do. But the answer is yes, we are going to bring on some Ambisonic experts that do this all the time. Jeff did a very good job of explaining a lot of these bits and pieces and get the baseline kind of set up. So thanks, Jeff, for joining us today. And making sure that we got everything right. And so, but expect us to do more conversations about this as we go through the year, because I do believe that in all forms of surround, we're going to have to pay more and more attention to it. There's going to be a lot more demand. Thank you to the panelists that all came and joined us and are part of this conversation today. We can't do this without you. We also can't do it without the producers asking all the great questions and driving this conversation forward. That's the trick, by the way, is that the reason you're like, how can you do a show every day for 2 hours? Producers asking questions. That is the trick. It gives us something to talk about. We don't have to come up with a ton of content. We can just sit here and you drive the conversation. So thank you so much for the great questions today. And thanks to the incredible team on the back end that put this all together. There's a team that's producing the content. You'll see them in the credits. There's also the development team that's actually making this thing work. There's the management team that makes sure that we know what's happening next. And it's just really an amazing group of people that make this happen every single day, 7 days a week. And we have not missed a day since March 25th, 2020. So we're approaching our 4th year of not missing a single day. And that has to do with huge team, huge village that makes that actually possible. So thank you to your contribution there. We traveled 61,000 miles today, 98,000 kilometers, and that is 483 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. Sorry about the open today. I didn't realize how sensitive I am. Like Jeff Cohen's, he had some error message that I guess popped up. He didn't put it up. He put an error message that popped up, and I just couldn't see it. It was down in the lower corner, but I also couldn't remember what I was going to say next. I'm not reading anything. It's just like in my memory. So if I get knocked off, I couldn't find my way back, and I was just like, oh.
You need some blinders for doing the open.
No, I'm just going to. After this, I'm just going to move. I'm going to move the stage off the screen. And then I'll put the program on it, so that's all I can see, and that'll be fine. And
Digital blinders.
There's a new operative practice that got created today. So
Live is hard.
So especially when you're not. I admit that I like to do it from memory, and that's a dangerous way to live. So I paid the price today. All right.
Easily distracted by shiny objects.
Yeah, exactly. All right.